How is it going, guys? I'm SEC Hoops. If you haven't seen me before, this is what I look like. I'm just going to talk about the conference as a whole here for the next 15 or so minutes, however long it takes. We're just going to jump right in. I'm going to talk about the conference standings. I'm going to go down and talk about each team in their respective standings. Let's jump right into this. So, first off, we have Texas A&M. Now, A&M started off the year horribly. They were blown out against SMU and Oklahoma State, and they did not look good. But ever since then, they've just flipped some kind of switch, and it's been honestly really entertaining basketball to watch. My favorite thing about them is they have no ego. They just play pure basketball, and it's so much fun to watch. They play great as a team. And, you see the comparisons always of the Nolan Richardson 40 minutes of hell, right? But there are some very real comparisons, not necessarily in the prestige of the coach. Bucky McMillan is obviously nowhere close to as good or prestigious as Nolan Richardson was, but the style in which they play, they press for a full 40, and it's very difficult to prepare for, especially if you're not used to it. And it's made them very successful in the SEC because none of these teams are prepared for it. With that being said, they have a really tough schedule coming up. They've gotten by lately by playing some of the lesser teams in the conference, Mississippi State, South Carolina. They've won against Oklahoma. A lot of the bottom half teams. They'll have a lot of top half teams. They did nearly beat Tennessee on the road. Arguably should have won that game, but it is what it is. However, you can't hate on A&M. They're so fun to watch, and it's been a great start to the season. Hopefully they end out the season still in the top half of the conference. I imagine they will because they're just so difficult to prepare for, but it's been a lot of fun for A&M. Second in the conference right now is Kentucky. Now, Kentucky's on a 5-game winning streak, but I don't fully believe they're completely back yet. And it's not because I'm trying to hate on them. It's just, you look at the wins. The wins aren't particularly all that great, besides winning at Tennessee, which is a phenomenal win for them, the way they were able to come back. But offensively, I haven't seen a whole lot that suggests that this is a team that's going to stay, as a top 4 team in the SEC. We'll see at the end of the season, of course, but I don't know. They've had to rely a lot lately on free throw shooting, and that's not exactly sustainable. Part of that is they're just attacking the rim a lot more than they did early in the season, so teams can't defend them without fouling, but they're going to have to find some kind of balance because they have a huge week coming up here starting tomorrow, and they are going to have to win those, at least one of those, in my opinion, if I want to fully see them as completely back. So for Kentucky, 5 in a row is great, but let's see it against some of the better competition in the SEC. Arkansas. Well, Arkansas is a lot of fun to watch. I was questioning their defense for a long time, but the defensive performance I personally saw, and everyone else obviously saw against Vanderbilt, really makes me believe that they can do some damage, not only in the SEC because they're currently tied for second, but they could win the SEC regular season. And then I'm not quite ready to say they're Final Four good yet, but they could definitely get there if they catch the right matchups. Or if they're playing well to end the season regardless, they could be a Final Four threat. Darius Acuff is so much fun to watch. Arkansas becomes such a good team when he is the main distributor, because when he is not distributing as much, that's when Arkansas tends to struggle. So we'll have to see if teams can try and adjust to that. If they can make Acuff more of a playmaker just for himself, that makes Arkansas a little less dangerous, but still a very good team nonetheless. Florida, they're 4th. And for Florida, early in the season, I said all preseason, their success will come down to the guard play, because I had made notes in the preseason that Boogie Fland was not good at Arkansas when they played against good competition. And Xavier Lee would have a lot of adjusting to do going from the Ivy League to the SEC. And to be honest, they're still not fully adjusted. And you can see, that's going to be their downfall if they continue to play like this. Because once again, for the most part, the front court was great against Auburn, but besides Alex Condon, he was really struggling in that game. He just didn't look comfortable. He hasn't looked comfortable particularly all season, especially with his 3-point shot. So we'll see. But I think Florida's another team. They could definitely still win the conference, but they're a team that I'm not really looking at as a championship contender. I don't think there are any teams in the SEC that are necessarily championship contenders, but Florida would be my closest, in my personal opinion, to a championship contender only if both Boogie Fland and Xavier Lee are playing their best basketball in March Madness. We will see, but I have not seen anything to suggest they can consistently play at that upper echelon level where they need to be. Missouri, surprisingly, they are actually tied for 5th place right now. So they're 14-6 and 4-3 in the conference. Mark Mitchell with an incredible shot to beat Oklahoma. You just feel for Oklahoma, sometimes with the way they've lost some of these games. But Missouri, I mean, they've put themselves right there in the conversation. I think right now, if I were to make a bracketology, they would probably be like a 10 or 11 seed. But if they keep this surge going, they're going to get in as an 8 or 9. And that's not the most ideal spot to be, but Missouri is a team that could, I don't think they could upset a 1 seed because the projected 1 seeds right now are absolutely insane. But if they were able to, I don't know, grab a 7 seed or a 10 seed, you play a 2 seed in the second round, all of a sudden you could manage a Sweet 16. We'll have to see, though. I'm not a big fan of Dennis Gates' style where he likes to foul bait. He has his teams draw a lot of fouls. That's what got them eliminated in the first round against Drake last year. Drake defended without fouling very well, and Missouri was completely exposed because of it. So we'll see. I do like Missouri, though. They're a pretty fun team to watch when they're clicking, but they're not always clicking is their issue. Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt started off 16-0, and they're now just 17-3. They lost 3 in a row, and after the big win over Mississippi State, they're 3 out of 4 losing. So, on a little bit of a red alert, but I'm not as worried about Vanderbilt as I am with some other teams, or as some other people are, because Vanderbilt was always going to struggle against the really athletic, tough front courts. And they had 3 straight games where they played some of the best wings front courts in the entire SEC. It started off with Texas, right? Well, Texas has Dalen Swain and Modest Vokititis, which is one of the best 1-2 combos at the 4 and 5 spot in the SEC, especially Dalen Swain. I personally kind of believe Vokititis is a little bit overrated. That's a discussion we'll have when we get to Texas. But that was always going to be a game that Vanderbilt was going to have a chance at losing, and they ended up getting blown out. And then the Florida one, look, they competed for a full 40 minutes, and Florida played their best complete basketball game of the season. Both teams were executing at such a high level. I don't fault Vanderbilt for losing that one. The Arkansas game, though, that was probably the most concerning because they were just completely out of it. There was never a point, especially after the first 10 minutes, where the game was even a little bit competitive. So that's going to be Vanderbilt's biggest issues for the rest of the season. It has been the entire year. We'll see what happens with them, but I'm not as worried about them. Tyler Nickel, Tyler Tanner, Duke Miles, one of the most fun backcourts to watch in the entire conference. And they also need to get Frankie Collins back because with Collins, they have a completely different dynamic. And he takes so much pressure off of Miles and Tanner to produce, and it makes the team gel, flow so much better. We will see what they're like when he's back and fully healthy. Next is Auburn, and Auburn, they've been so up and down. It's been hard to really get a good grasp on them this season, but overall, I think they're in a pretty solid spot, especially after that win over Florida. So, I'm back on board with them. There was a stretch in the non-con where they were getting blown out. Granted, against top 5 teams, Purdue and Arizona, but they're back on track right now. They're 13-7 overall, 4-3 in the conference. We'll see where they end up. I think they're going to end up around 9-9, 10-8, and heck, maybe 11-7 if they're doing really well in the latter half of the conference. Tennessee. Now, Tennessee, I really think this is going to be a team that's really clicking to end the season because we're seeing Nate Ament finally. It's taken over half the season, but he's finally figuring out how to play within the Rick Barnes offense, and it's been really fun to watch because he's been efficient, he's been very engaged, and he hunts his own shots. When Ament hunts his own shots, he can take a shot over anyone he wants. Sometimes he tends to forget, I feel like, that he is 6'10", and no one can block his shot. So when he takes his shots, they almost always look good. It's a matter of confidence with him too, but I think Tennessee is going to start really rolling. Hopefully this doesn't backfire, but they look like a team that could really be clicking to end the season. We'll see where that ends with them. Alabama, to be honest, even though Alabama has not been healthy, I'm still a little bit worried about them, especially on the defensive end of the floor. If they can't get healthy, I don't know if they'll be healthy at all the rest of the season. We'll see. But it's going to be a struggle if they don't have everyone available. But I like Alabama. I'm still worried about their reliance on the three-point shot, because if you're able to take away the three like Tennessee was, you saw the results. They were, sputtering offensively, and it didn't look exactly very pretty. So we'll see what happens with them. Texas is a team. They're 3-4 in the SEC right now, but they have 3 really good wins at Alabama, Vanderbilt, and then beating Georgia by 20 after being down 7.5. Just really impressive, the wins they've got, but the losses are concerning. However, at the end of the day, I think Texas is going to find a formula where they're going to get on a roll. It all depends on the play of Dalen Swain, especially. And back to my Matas Vokititis discussion, I'm not sold on him being all that good. Now, maybe this is me just being a hater, possibly, but every time I watch him play, he tends to struggle to put the ball on the floor, and I know that they didn't bring him in to be this elite ball handler, but anytime he puts the ball on the floor, he is struggling to get good looks at the basket. And that's why in my personal humble opinion, I think Texas's best formula is getting Dalen Swain attacking downhill and getting Matas Vokititis the ball in rhythm. So like you give him a power dribble inside, bounce the ball to him, and he's able to just go up, lay it up, dunk it, whatever. If Texas does things like that with Matas, they're going to be pretty difficult to beat. And they've been able to do that in their 3 wins. When teams make Matas put it on the floor, that's when they struggle. So I think Texas is going to be all right. I think they will sneak into the tournament. We will see, though. Ole Miss. Ole Miss, it's been so up and down. They're such a confusing team. My biggest issue with them is they have no real offensive identity. A lot of it's just A.J. Storr isolation. And if Ole Miss is going to be doing that the rest of the season, I'm not exactly convinced that they're going to be able to turn this around. They have some decent wins, and they've been pretty competitive, but that's not the type of formula you want if you want to bounce back. They're 11-9 right now, 3-4 in the conference. That's not the type of formula you're going to want if you want to make the tournament, and I don't think they're on track to do that right now. Mississippi State, look, it's been a disaster of a season, quite frankly. I mean, they didn't look good at all in the non-conference, and they started off SEC play 2-0, but now there's 2-5 in the conference. So they've lost 5 in a row, and especially this last game against Vanderbilt, they were just completely out of it. Even in some of their earlier losses in SEC play, they were leading Kentucky by 12 on the road and led Alabama by 14. But there's some disconnect about halfway through the first half, each game for them, where they just completely fall off a cliff and they get embarrassed for the rest of the game. So they really need to do something to change around the season. I don't know what it's going to be, though. Josh Hubbard has not been good the last week and a half. We'll have to see if that continues. South Carolina, I mean, honestly, there's not a whole lot to say about them, unfortunately. They are what they are, right? It's Michie Johnson going out and scoring a lot of points, getting his teammates involved, but it's usually ends up all for naught. Against Texas A&M, they gave up 12 threes in the first half, and they ended up giving up 17 for the game. That is absurd. And, I mean, for all intents and purposes, their season is kind of over. I mean, they could maybe salvage some wins here and sneak their way into the NIT, but it's tough. They have some promising young freshmen like E.J. Walker, Grant Polk, Hayden Assemian, but there's not much more to look forward to for South Carolina this season. Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma has been such a difficult watch because they're losing a lot of close games and they're also getting smacked around in some games. There's no real consistency with them. And what I see a lot with them, I feel like I see a lot of Xavier Brown and Nigel Pack isolation, which is not exactly a great formula. Those 2 players are best when they're involving their teammates. They're not doing that as much lately, and it's caused Oklahoma to fall to 1-6 in SEC play. And I think it's time that, Oklahoma makes some moves with Porter Moser, because it's becoming increasingly more obvious that he is not the guy. It's unfortunate, right? He's a easy coach to root for, but it's hard to see a path to succession when he just can't put together, you know, enough wins in power conference play. I don't have his exact number, but he has not had a winning season in conference play at all in any seasons at Oklahoma. His best season was last year when they went 6-12 in the SEC and made the NCAA tournament as a 9 seed. So there's a lot of reasons to fire Porter Moser, and I'm on that train right now. He's not the guy. This is not someone who should be leading a top 20 program all time. It's embarrassing for Oklahoma to be 1-6 and 11-9 right now. So they're going to need to make some moves. And lastly, LSU. Now, LSU is a team, I think they could actually end up clicking down the stretch of the season. We'll see, though, because, with Matt McMahon, no matter how talented the roster, they always tend to struggle in SEC play. But I don't fault them. Early in SEC play, I think the first 4 games, they didn't even have D-Dan Thomas. And they were still really competing at a high level against some pretty good SEC teams. Unfortunately, they're 1-6. They just had D-Dan back this past week. He did pretty well and kept LSU competitive, but competitive isn't enough. If LSU doesn't start putting together some wins, Matt McMahon is going to be canned at the end of this season, and deservingly so, right? LSU is a proud basketball program, and they're just not competing. But, we'll see with LSU. I like their dynamic when D-Dan is, he's playing well. And it's never good to lose a point guard for an extended stretch, but it gave Jalen Reese, their backup point guard, a lot of run at the point, and he did some good things. He's not an offensive threat to shoot or score, but he can move the offense well at times, and it's good for player development. But we'll see with LSU. I think they could go on a bit of a run and end up maybe making the NIT, but I don't know if they would accept that. So that's my opinion on the SEC individually. As a conference, I can't say that I see any national championship contenders in the SEC. It's just, I don't see any way that any of these teams can. Now, Florida proved they could. I don't see any way that these teams can compete with the likes of Arizona, I look at Michigan and UConn. Those are my 3, championship favorites. I don't see any team other than Florida being able to compete with those teams in March Madness. We will see. I think Arkansas is a team that could really get going down the stretch, because John Calipari-led teams always end up finding a way to do really well down the stretch of the season. So we'll see. I think this SEC season is more akin to y'all remember the 22-23 season? I think it's more like that, except there's no national championship contender. That season you had Alabama as the number 1 overall seed. There's no one like that this season. I think a fully healthy Alabama is really dangerous, but my concern with them is getting healthy, right? They have not been healthy really at all this season, and they're suffering because of it. But yeah, if you guys made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. It's almost 20 minutes long, a little bit longer than I would have liked to make the video, but we move, I appreciate it so much. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.